So today we have Ewell with us today. Ewell, can you go ahead and tell us your full name, a little bit about where you grew up, and we're interested, very interested in hearing your spiritual story. So without further ado, go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you very much, John. This, of course, is a good opportunity for me to recall a lot of things I've not thought about in many years. My full name is Arthur Ewell Hardman. I was born July the 3rd, 1948, in Atlanta, Georgia,
Oh, okay.
Emory University. We first lived in Decatur, Georgia. And that's really where my story starts. My first memories are between age 2 and 2.5, where I met the Iceman who brought milk in glass jars
Oh, yeah, yeah.
packed in boxes of ice, and he would deliver them to our porch. But I was already waiting on the front porch for him in the morning about 8 o'clock, because that's when he would usually come. My mother would be standing out there with me. And one morning, the Iceman gave me a chunk of ice from the box. And, today, no one would ever give you raw ice just from
No.
a box of delivery of milk, even if they were doing it that way. Nevertheless, he brought me that fresh milk with that chunk of ice. And for me, this was the kindness of a stranger. It was the image of the world as a kind place with kind people and of a God of plenty. That's how I see it today. I had no idea that that would begin to assert in me a certain worldview. This was the kind of experiences that I began to incorporate into my life. And because of this event, I became trusting and open, even at 2 and 2.5 years. For the next event that I remember, and I don't remember an awful lot about my mother and father during those first couple of years, but at 2.5, we moved to Lithonia. Now,
Okay.
Lithonia in those years was a place of dirt roads, spare electricity, no running water, and no natural gas. We were totally out in the country. I can remember that from time to time after a big rain, even though the hills were quite small, I would have to get out and push the car to help the car from getting unstuck in the mud just for us
Wow.
to get home.
So this would be around 1951, 52.
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yes. So we had a propane tank for gas, we had a fireplace, we had a well, and with the electricity, even though we felt country when we got the water running, it was wonderful. It was quiet. I had an experience of guilt, though, uh, when I was using my father's golf clubs to
Wow.
hit raw walnuts around the front yard. Raw walnuts, when they come from the tree, have a green
Yeah.
cover over them. And if you get them right after they fall on the ground, they're quite hard. And so
Yeah.
I would pick out the hard ones and just set them on the ground and
Eat up.
knock them into the neighbor's yard or whatever by using his golf clubs. And that's what I would do for entertainment. It was always fun when the walnuts began to fall. But Dan, as I always called him Danny, he always said, call me Dan, but I called him Danny. One day he reached down to get one of my green walnuts, and without thinking, I just swung away.
Oh no.
He was 2.5 years younger, and I was about 4 or 5 at the
Oh
time.
no.
And once I got started, I couldn't stop it. And I hit him square between the eyes.
Oh
And
my
even
God.
today, there's a scar right above
Yeah.
the eyes.
Oh
And
my Lord.
he has reminded me of that for
Yeah.
decades and decades. So
I don't know
I've
what the
tested
karma
it.
is
And
on that one.
yeah, I didn't do it intentionally.
I
I was
know,
just
but
doing
yeah.
it for fun. So I was surprised when he started bleeding from the head.
Yeah.
Um, but a while later, we were throwing rocks at each other, as boys will sometimes do. The front yard was not yet covered with grass. It was a rocky, grassless yard. And we would pick up rocks. Well, threw one at me and hit me square between the eyes.
Wow.
And that rock made my forehead bleed, and it left a scar, which is still visible to this day. And so that was my first experience of karma.
Yes, sir.
Uh, so it also is my first memory of guilt, because I knew I had thrown the rock hoping to hit him. Unfortunately, I did hit him. Nobody believed my story that we were just playing.
Yeah.
But it happened again about 2 years later. We were playing, and by that time we had a concrete front porch. We had rocking chairs on the porch. I
Okay.
was in a rocking chair, and my brother came running out of the house on a Saturday or a summer afternoon. I didn't know what day of the week it was, but on a Saturday, a summer afternoon, he was running out of the house, and I stuck my foot out and tripped him, and he fell out the side of the porch on that. And we fought for a good while over that. And then I got the full blame for it because he wouldn't let me off the hook. That was a memory of true guilt, even worse than hitting him with the golf
Oh,
club.
yeah.
Of
Yeah.
course, he linked them together. I didn't want that.
Seems to me number two there was intentional.
It was quite intentional. And like I said, I had to take that for myself.
Yeah.
But by the third grade, I had one of the tougher events of my life. My father had high blood pressure and other heart problems. It was 1958. He and my mother flew to Colorado to get him heart surgery.
Oh, wow.
But he returned and we held a funeral because he never came back alive.
So
During that time that they were in the hospital, we stayed with our neighbors, my brother and I. It was about a couple of weeks, as I can remember. And what I remember about the funeral was my younger brother, being about 5 at that time. I helped hold him up so he could see my father in his um, casket. And
that was here in Atlanta then.
yes,
Yeah. Okay.
and he did this kind of thing where you run your fingers up and then you bounce off the nose. For him, it was playful because he
Oh, I
was
see.
looking at his
Yeah.
dad.
Yeah.
He had no sense of grief at that time.
Yeah.
While for me, I was deep in grief.
Sure.
He was still not experiencing that. And so after that event, my mother began telling bedtime stories. And this was the beginning of a kind of moral affirmation, a moral education for me, because bedtime stories from a series of books, I don't have any of those that I can recall now,
Yeah.
If I do, they're hidden away, and it's been a long time. But they are rich stories written for children, that for parents to read to them, which was common in the 50s.
Sure.
And I remember sitting there and thinking about a child who had stolen, and a child who had a train, and the things that happened in their lives. And so those stories of moral adventure were to me the beginning of my spiritual education in a
Sure.
more formal way. Even though I'd been going to church and Sunday school since about the age of 5, this seemed to be more important to me than that.
It's kind of like a parable.
Beg your pardon?
Kind of like a parable.
Yes, yes. Yeah, they were intentional stories of spiritual living.
Beautiful.
At that time, I was already in the 400s.
Mm.
If you're familiar with 400s and the scale of consciousness, then you would know that that time I had reasonable skill. I had a reasonable ability to reason as a function of my thinking. And so, as an 8 and 9-year-old, I did well in school and well in all my pursuits. I had experiences that put me in touch with wonder, and some over 600 that I cannot recall yet, but I will share with you other events that I can recall as we go along. These were experiences that did not impact me deeply because I failed to have an adequate understanding of their meaning, and I didn't know what to do with them. I didn't know what to do with insight. I didn't know what to do with awe and wonder, but I observed them from within.
Absolutely.
These were moments that a person peers into the unexpected, into grace, into peace, into new knowledge. Even if we can't integrate it, we become a witness to God and his presence around us. And to me at that time, it was just a part of life with a bright light put on it. I didn't have an understanding of it more than that. Rockland Methodist was the place I referred to when I went to church, a small church several miles from home. And when I was a 6-year-old on a Sunday morning, my dad opened the back door of our Hudson. If you'll remember Hudsons, they were like tanks. It was built sometime late in the 40s. I would say it was probably a 48 or 1950 Hudson. They would soon go out of business.
Lots of
But
steel in them, though.
uh,
Lots of steel.
oh yes. And I remember he opening the door, but I decided to close the door. And I closed the door on his hand. And if you know how the rear door is, once you close the door,
It's not
it's a
open.
terrible thing. And so I don't even know the kind of damage I did to his hand. He was a linotype operator, which is it's really work on a keyboard where you hit the keys and it sets lead letters in the large set of lead letters that is used to print the newspaper. It's
Yeah,
difficult for me
typesetting.
to explain, but paradoxically, my mother was the proofreader of the linotype, which he would type. So between both of them, they set the type and proofread every edition of the Atlanta Journal that came out
Oh
for
my.
some time as they worked. So they worked as a team. It was very
All right, so wait,
strange.
back up 1 second. Now, this is your mom and who?
And my father,
Oh, okay. I just
I
wanted to
had
make sure
had
I
to
understood.
backtrack because
All right.
from 6 to 8, I had forgotten this part
Yeah.
of it.
All right.
So for those 2 to 3 years, they operated as a team doing this. And then at age 8, my father died. And so
I
my
see.
mother lost her job as well because she stayed at home with us.
Yeah.
While I was at church, I had a best friend there. His name is Lamar. And we were in the same Sunday school together. Uh, while I was there, the most significant event over several years was I received a 3 by 4 inch plastic picture of Jesus, the shepherd, and a scene of sheep behind him. That small 3 by 4 inch plastic Jesus that might have cost 25 or 50 cents, probably purchased at a 5 and dime store that were common in not only Lithonia, but other cities around town, was a gift to me, I think, at Christmas one year. But I prized it. It sat on my dresser for years. I can remember it being there as I was in high school. The entire time, the picture of Jesus was one that stared at me all those years. And it was a 600 moment for me, which I never appreciated. I only saw it as a reminder of someone. But there were moments in my life that I now measure as being in the presence of God, and I was not aware of it. In fact, until
So, and
today, I never measured that at all.
so you're saying that the picture of Jesus on your dresser all
Yeah.
those years, what was in him, I guess, shall we say, sort of watching over? Uh, and was there a particular incident, or it was just the fact that he was there? And you're speaking, of course, when you're talking about 600, meaning the scale of consciousness by Dr. David R. Hawkins, correct?
Yes. Now, the latter is true. There was never a moment that I remember that was anything particular or special.
I see. Okay.
But what was real is that it was a centering experience.
I see.
When I was in seminary some years later at Emory University, Candler School of Theology, I remember reading Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer was the English pastor who was held responsible for the attempt on Hitler's life.
Right.
And he was hanged before the end of the war after spending many months in prison. And we have also his letters from prison. But what he also did is he wrote a book called The Center. And this was easy for me to experience because I had not realized that this Jesus had been present with me and had become the center of my life much earlier than I was aware. So this was an old place in my spiritual history, which I could neither fathom nor describe. There were other good and positive experiences for me there. After my father's death, we changed churches and went to a closer small Baptist church at the end of our road. And there was nothing special there except for me as an observer. I observed other people being hyper emotional, including the pastor. I don't have a single memory except of the pastor being weird
Yeah.
and of their emotional outbursts. It was what I call rowdy religion.
That's a good
But
word.
they were,
It's an excellent word for that.
yes, but
Yeah,
they were
excellent.
devoted people. but
Okay,
on Sunday
rowdy
they
religion.
changed. Huh?
That's perfect. Rowdy religion. That excellent description.
It didn't last long.
Yeah.
And we soon went to the Lithonia First Methodist Church in town, where I was about 11 when we started there. And at age 12, I joined in the confirmation class of a Pastor Henderson, and he baptized me on Easter Sunday with a couple of my roommates. And I was 12 on the year I was, that was my baptism when I was 12 years of age.
When you're 12, yeah.
During that time, in order to make a living, my mother and my grandfather built a chicken house on our land.
Hmm.
And it was 120 feet by 40 feet.
Oh, that's big.
Pretty big house. It held 3,000 chickens.
Yeah.
And so we started out with started pullets. We would keep them 8 to 10 weeks. Um, Later, we had chickens we raised for slaughter. We would keep them only maybe 8 weeks because they'd be fat enough. They'd become fryers or they'd become
Yeah.
somebody's lunch somewhere. And then finally, we moved to egg laying because at that time, the competition really was growing and people were building houses 4 to 10 times our size in the community. And so we couldn't compete anymore with raising only 3,000 because they were building 10,000 and 40,000 hen houses now. And so we started laying eggs, and we had baskets in the houses that we built, and automatic feeders and automatic watering machines. And so there was a lot to do year round.
Oh, yeah.
That was where I learned to hate winter. And I still have a hard time with winter because in the winter, I'd have to get up in the morning and feed the chickens before school.
Yeah.
And that was something for a 9 or 10-year-old
Oh, yeah.
to really do. You know, we would do that all before breakfast and before school. And so school bus came around 8 o'clock, but that still gave us time to do all that. But I never felt it to be a bad thing. It was just what we did because we were all as a family working to make a living. And
Sure.
to jump ahead a few years, at age 16, we were still doing the egg thing. And I was the youngest person ever licensed in the state of Georgia to grade eggs.
Really?
So I was an official egg grader in the state. And so we bought an egg grading machine and it was put in our dining room. And we would not only lay the eggs, we would grade them, box them, and put them out for sale.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes.
Do
So,
you still have that?
oh no, I don't know. I
Oh,
should have, but
yeah.
it got
Where? Who
lost.
knows, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible.
So I had a great high school experience. I began running track about that time. We also shut down our egg grading machine because after a short operation, once again, competition just
Sure.
was so high because people built larger areas. They became egg raising farms,
Yeah.
hiring many people. We were a 2-person, 3-person farm.
Yeah,
Uh,
but you were the first grader.
yeah,
You
yeah,
got that.
I got that. Um, and so by the age of 12, I'm sorry, by the 12th grade rather,
Yeah.
I had done well in school. I was elected president of my senior class, and I never remember running. I never figured out how that happened. but they said, "You've been elected president." I
Perfect.
asked them, "What does that mean?"
Yeah.
I was totally socially ignorant. And
Oh,
they
wow.
said, "That means when we have a problem, we call you and you go talk to the principal." I said, "Okay, what are the problems you're having?" And they said, "Would you go ask him if the senior class can do this?" So I was just a dumbass socially. And but I understood what it was like to go talk to people. I didn't have any problem because I had this guy that this idea that, well, the principal, who is he? I'll go talk with him. It didn't
Yeah.
make a difference to me. So I had this kind of buddy relationship with the principal, and I'd tell him anything that some of the folks in the class were harping
Oh,
about
my.
and complaining about.
Oh,
And so I
my.
had a good relationship with the people in the office. And so one day we had a conversation with the counselor, and he said, "Well, what do you want to do when you graduate?" I said, "I have got no idea." And so he offered me some possibilities. He said, "Well, what if I seek a scholarship for you?" I said, "Well, that'd be nice. What do you got in mind?" And he started naming schools and stuff. He
Yeah.
said, "Well, I've got one here that ought to be worth about $25,000 to you. You'll have to pass a test, and you'll have to have an interview, but they're not going to have but maybe one or two people in Georgia." I said, "Okay, tell me what to do." And doggone if I didn't get it. It was a competitive scholarship for the General Motors Institute for what would be a 4 or 5 year master's degree in engineering.
Wow.
And so that allowed me to just go to work right out of high school at General Motors
Yeah.
Institute and for General Motors Company in Doraville, Georgia. You know, they were
Yeah.
making
Yeah.
1967 Chevrolets. I
Wow.
remember seeing a black 427 Super Sport sitting there and just thinking, wow, I get to watch them build this thing. And
Yeah.
so it was an exciting time. I got to wear a white shirt and t-shirt and a tie to work every day as an 18-year-old.
Oh,
And
my.
they paid me and gave me half a semester credit for doing that because it was considered being on the job training for management.
Yeah.
And so the idea was I'd work with management 6 weeks, I'd go to class for 6 weeks, but I didn't know quite what I was getting into. I didn't know they had 6-day-a-week classes. I
Oh,
didn't know they went to school like they went to a job. We didn't get out until 4 or 5 o'clock every day. I had 27 credit hours instead of the usual 15 for most
oh,
colleges.
yeah. That's a lot.
It was nasty. I had no idea. And so, come the end of the semester, which was December,
Yeah.
I got a letter that says, unfortunately, your grades were not adequate to pass.
Yeah.
So, in spite of the fact that there were only two of us approved in the state of Georgia, me and a guy from Tucker, we all were, in the highest levels of our classes and calculus and trig and had all that stuff. It didn't matter when we got there because these were folks who they were just superior. And besides that, I was living in a dorm with other folks who mostly drank beer and told jokes,
Yeah.
and so for me, being away from school and in Flint, Michigan, was quite a deal. I'd never seen it snow in October.
Yeah.
It was 10 inches of snow in October in Flint, Michigan, and nobody missed a beat. By 8 o'clock in the morning, the streets had been cleared by
Yeah.
everything. If you drove a car, you didn't dare park on the side
No.
of the road.
Yeah. It'd be covered up.
Yeah. So after that, I came home. I remember sitting on a red sofa with my girlfriend whom I had met in high school and I'd met at the Lithonia church. And we'd sung in the choir director in the choir for years, and we fell in love, and we went to school together the first year at DeKalb College. After that first year, though, it was 1968.
Ooh.
The war in Vietnam was heavy. The draft was on. My brother joined the Marine Corps. And then July, I joined the Air Force.
Wow.
Instead of going back, I decided I'm not going to play Russian roulette here and get drafted and have no control over my future.
Yeah.
I decided I would join up. And when I joined in and I took the tests, they said, Hardman, you can do whatever you want. What do you want to do?
Wow.
Now, most people didn't get a chance to do that.
Yeah.
Most people were lined up and they were told, this is your duty station. You'll go here.
Yeah.
I didn't have that kind of conversation. I had a different kind of conversation. He sat down with the guy and he gave me some choices, and I picked air traffic control.
Wow.
And so I got to go to training in Biloxi, Mississippi. Then I went to South Georgia for further training and supervision at Moody Air Force Base.
Yeah.
And there I got to fly an F-5 or a T-38, the fastest aircraft in the the Air Force's inventory would climb 30,000 feet in a minute straight up. And
Yeah.
I got to go on one of those flights. Scared the bejeebus out of me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I remember sitting at the end of the runway with a test pilot. He said, I got some extra gas. It's near Christmas. We need to blow this gas up. So I want you to ride with me. And so I left the tower, went to the front line, got in the back seat. He said, I'm never going to tell you I'm out of here but one time. He said, when I say I'm out of here, that means you pull those levers under your butt and push the red button. It's going to blast you out of here.
Yeah.
And he said, that's how we survive. So that was my training.
Oh my God.
And so it was like a AA fuel dragster going down the runway.
Yeah.
And by the time we got to the end of the runway, we were at 10,000 feet.
Oh my.
It was that dynamic a trip. We finally leveled off at 45,000 feet in South Georgia, which it was protected airspace. I never knew about that, but the jets don't fly through that area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it belongs to the Air Force.
Air Force. Yeah.
And so it was a training block. And so he said, Hardman, you got it, which meant I could fly.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about that. I had a stick in my hand.
Yeah.
And I knew where the power was. So I bent it over because I was going to do one of these left turns, right? And since I didn't understand about turning, I didn't understand about the nose tipping down. And when the nose tips down, you don't make a turn like this. You make an S turn to the ground.
Yeah.
And so he let me go from 45,000 to 24,000, which was the bottom of our airspace. And he said, Hardman, you better let me have it. He said, look out your window. He said, those little things you see are not daisies. Those are cities. He said, you've been flying us straight into the dirt. So he hit the afterburner rather, and brought us straight up about 4 Gs. And, I thought I was going to crap in my pants.
Yeah.
And he told me how to keep from doing that by by tensing all your muscles.
Yeah.
So, but that was one of those experiences. It was a one-time experience that is unforgettable. This is one of the first times in my life I've told it without crying, because it was so remarkable to have
Yeah.
had that experience. When we landed, I threw up. So I had to clean out my oxygen mask with a foot long
Huh.
cleaner. Well,
So this aircraft would fly at Mach speed?
yes.
Yeah. Because you mentioned this was an F4?
No, F4s were
Anyway,
not a trainer at that point. This
okay.
was a uh, this was a very slim trainer fighter,
Okay.
and it was two engines on a matchstick,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was designed for high speed and for um, other Air Force operations, but it was not a fighter. There were some fighters, but these were all set up as trainers without ammunition.
Yeah. What
Well,
an experience, though. What an experience.
yeah, but joined with that was my trip to Okinawa.
Oh.
In that trip, we sold our 68 Mustang, which was bought new,
Mm.
to buy a ticket for Delta Airlines for my wife, who was pregnant, to fly to Okinawa for us to spend time together. And so she stayed with me for a year there. My tour was a year and a half. During that time, I became a quote, a navigator, which was somebody who was in a small Bible study group. We studied the Bible a couple of times a week, memorized verses. We sought to convert others to Christianity, or we would invite them into this Bible study organization. They are an organization that was set throughout the military. And at that time, they were quite small quite large in the military during the Vietnam War. And as I found out later, at home, they were available in the United States also. But they had workshops and I attended those. And one of the remarkable ones that I remember that I circled the scripture in my Bible says, oh, it was a scripture that pick up your cross daily. And that idea of pick up your cross stuck with me. And later I came to understand the cross was not the literal cross of Jesus, but the cross is your calling.
Right.
Whatever it is, which is the gift and the calling of God, it is for the disciple to pick up and carry. And of course, we remember all the disciples of Jesus died in their service to him.
Yes.
But for me, the navigators was a protection, it was a sanctuary from the life of the military for men who had no guidance and no grounding. But amazingly, the first day I arrived, I found my way to the base from the airport. And in the dining hall, I remember a man dressed in white. Unfortunately, I don't even remember his name right now. But he came over and sat with me and he said, "Hey, you want to go shoot some baskets after dinner?" I said,
Mm.
"Sure." Now it was around 11 o'clock in the morning at that point, but I was really having breakfast. And so after about 4 o'clock or so, I made my way over to where a group of men were shooting baskets. And I believe his name was Caldwell.
Mm.
And he introduced me to him. Uh, and they seemed to be from all over the place. And later he said, "You want to join? We're going for a Bible study. You want to join us?" I thought, well, I've got a room, but I got nowhere else to go, nothing else to do. Sure. And besides, they're going to a Bible study group. So why not? So when I got there, once again, yeah, I introduced myself and they said they were the navigators. And this is what they do all week is they engage in sports, they meet other people, they develop Bible story groups, they study the Bible, they memorize verses. And so I was involved with them every week until my wife got over there. Then when she got over there, she would meet with their wives. And so we had this cubicle, this sanctuary for both of us while we were there for that year and a half. And
That's
out of
great.
that grew my passion, my desire, my skills, my memory
Mm.
of memory of God in my life. And I got back home in June of 1972, and the Methodist Youth Fellowship director came to me and said, "We want you to be the youth director. You okay with that?" I said, "Look, I don't know anything about doing this. I just got back from the military. You know, I wasn't, I haven't even settled yet." They said, "Well, just do this." Uh, and So, yeah, I started doing it as a volunteer. But there was a new pastor at the church, and he said, "Well, look, if you want to do this, I'll pay you." And
Wow.
so I said, "Well, I don't have anything against money
Mm.
because I really was looking for a job anyway."
Yeah.
And so that was my first job in the church.
Wow.
And so I was going to school. I got on the GI Bill. And so as I was finishing my school in education, I had another couple of years to go. So come September, I started school at University of Georgia. I made A's. So I was a couple of years older. I was actually 4 years older than most people by then.
Yeah.
And so school was no problem. And while I was doing that, I also met a lady at the library at DeKalb Junior College, where Nancy and I were going together. And she worked for a man in a radio station, a ministry station,
Hmm.
a Bible teacher. His name was Manford George Gutsky. He was in his late 70s. He had 4 earned PhDs. I'd never met anybody with 4 earned PhDs. He had a doctor of juris,
That's a
had a
lot.
doctorate, PhD in psychology. He had a
Yeah.
PhD in philosophy from the Columbia University in New York. He
Whoa.
had a PhD in theology from Columbia University in Decatur, Georgia.
Hmm.
So let's see, I think that's 4. So out of that, he retired from being a teacher at Columbia there in Decatur, and he opened up his own office about half a mile away in a small home that had been converted. And uh, this friend of mine introduced me to him and the staff, and they hired me right away. My job was to edit all of his teachings.
Hmm.
Back then, the technology was the 7-inch circular discs with tape. And so my job was to listen to all of his tapes, which we recorded in-house there.
Yeah.
And I would edit them for time and then send them to the radio stations. And they would go to maybe 80 stations around the country. And so sometimes he would have a sermon that would last 45 minutes, and I'd have to edit it to 29 and a half seconds or something like that.
Right.
So what I got to do would be listen to his messages
Yeah.
every day, all day for 4 to 6 hours, listening to this man teach from his entire life experience. An unbelievable opportunity.
I was just
And
going to say, what an opportunity.
yeah, so I did that throughout my college life. And so After 3 years or so, I finished up and I resigned there, and because my district superintendent asked me to take two small churches, and so I became a local pastor. I had started seminary at Emory University, and so from there, I finished up, and it was a 3-year full-time curriculum in Master of Divinity. I tell folks I would have rather been a neurologist or a surgeon, maybe. But anyway, I was doing exactly what I needed to do. And I never really was going to become an engineer. I was really built for, and my karma was to go this direction. And by the time I got ready to preach, I had all kinds of stuff that I had learned from Manfred George Gutsky. So
Sure.
preaching for me was simply talking to folk about what I could see. And that lasted for 12 years until I decided to leave the public ministry and become a counselor. And I went to work for Metro Atlanta Recovery Residences as a primary counselor and a spiritual life leader.
Yeah.
Taught spiritual life and was a primary counselor there. Stayed there 19 years and ended up being a clinical director of the organization. It grew to where there were 110 or so staff by then, 4
Yeah.
separate programs that I was responsible for. And so I moved from there to Summit Counseling Center, spent 13 years there. Then I moved, I built 2 private treatment centers. One was a Rise Recovery Center in Noonan. One was a Rise Recovery Residences in let's see, getting all my cities mixed up. In Fayetteville, and they're now operating. I retired there in July from both of those companies, and they're operating full time as a certified, insurance supported, state licensed mental health and addiction treatment center.
And you're saying Horizon? Is that what I'm hearing right?
Arise Recovery and
Oh, Arise. Okay.
Yeah, the one in Fayetteville, I don't think I completely said the name, is Arise Recovery and Behavioral Health.
I see.
They take clients every day. They've got a great clinical director and CEO, both of which I've worked for about 30 years. I don't say I worked for them. They worked for me because I was the clinical director.
Yeah.
Both the current clinical director and the CEO, I supervised and taught them for the 30 years that I was there. Not 30 years, but the 19 years I was at MAR, I provided them guidance. And they both became the CEO and the clinical director of my companies. And now I've retired from there. And so now I'm starting Healing Seekers. And so we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. By the way, Healing Seekers is meeting, tell me again now.
Tuesdays at 7 p.m.
Tuesday at 7.
I skipped over my time of Hawkins.
Yeah.
I met Dr. Hawkins in 2004, I think. I had been reading and learning from him since around 1990. I got his book, Power and versus Force.
Right.
I gave a copy to another friend who worked with me named Chris. He and I worked together. I was his supervisor for the time that he was in school and becoming a licensed counselor. And I was still at MAR at that time. That's Metro Atlanta Recovery Residences. I'm going to their banquet, by the way, on Saturday.
Oh, it's this week?
Yes.
Okay. I've
And
been to, I think, 4 of them. Matter of fact, I met Chris at the banquet.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um, but Dr. Hawkins' literature has enthralled me. I've read, I think, all but one of his books, which I am getting ordered this week. Recovery and Spirituality, I think, is the title. May not have gotten all the words correct, but he has been important in being an integrator of knowledge, an integrator of spiritual and religious experience. He is an integrator of all that I have learned. He has integrated, for me, ministry and spiritual education into a larger whole of consciousness education.
Yes.
The arena of spiritual education has been the domain in America, largely of spiritual direction. We don't have anything that I'm aware of that has the freedom, which I saw in Dr. Hawkins, to go anywhere with any topic at any time
Yeah.
and relate it to reality.
Yeah.
And so the capacity to see in larger terms is what I have obtained from Dr. Hawkins. My memory of my visit with him surrounds the time that I was able to sit on the stage one-to-one with him during a workshop in Sedona where
Wow.
my wife and I visited. I
Yeah.
listened to him during the entire day when he was doing the entire day speeches once a month. And he invited me. My wife didn't want to go. She was pretty exhausted by that time. But I stood in line for quite a while just to be able to sit at the table and ask a question.
Yeah.
And so I did so. I have since then forgotten the question. But what I remember is the experience
Yes.
and his openness to every person to be available and his tremendous capacity to respond to any human at any time about anything.
Yeah.
At that point in life, he seemed to be in his late 80s. And so that stands as a critical moment for me. I have never calibrated that time, but it remains a special time for me. So I could talk about other things later on in my life. I think I took a change, and by January of 2023, I mark as a moment of escalation. I have not studied it enough to know why, but I began to change my focus from doing more spiritual work and counseling to a work that began to center on healing, a ministry, and becoming a vessel for consciousness.
Yeah.
From January of 23 to the present time has been a growing awareness of a new role and a new chapter in my life. It is focused on the group called Healing Seekers, where it's open to everybody At this time, it is no cost. We intend to become a nonprofit LLC at this time, hopefully by January of 25. I've obtained the permission of my church at Lithonia Methodist, the same one I was baptized in, the
Right.
same one I was married in, the same one that has been there for my children and their baptisms. So
So is the Tuesday meeting at 7 at the church, or is it Zoom, or how are you doing it?
the Thursday meeting is a Zoom meeting.
All right, wait, are you doing Tuesday or Thursday?
I'm doing Thursday. Did I say Tuesday? If
Yeah,
so, I was in error. I have another meeting. Another thing I do is I still supervise physicians in the state, and so I do that work on Tuesdays. But um,
so this is Thursday at 7 and it's on Zoom, or is it?
yes,
Okay, Zoom.
I
Okay,
do other counseling related to this ministry on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. I reserve Mondays and Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays for myself, my more focused work. I have to spend much time in prayer and meditation.
yeah,
My other mentor has been Dr. I have to get his name. He has Dr. Herb Benson.
okay,
Herbert Benson was a Harvard graduate who spent 50 years studying the work of meditation, the outcome of meditation, the link between meditation and healing, spirituality, and medical science. And he has used a variety of medical methods to validate his work. Up until a couple of years ago, when he died at the age of 84, he was still teaching routinely. He has established a school of study at the Boston College, Boston University Hospital. Still, it can be accessed. And so he has become unknown to him. I've become one of his disciples because studying it from a physician gave me confidence in its scientific validity,
yeah,
and as well as from his standpoint, its spiritual reality. He's not ignorant of the spiritual guidance for meditation, nor is he ignorant of it as a spiritual tool. But his training and his scientific study over 50 years has been a gift to humanity, still largely unknown. But
yeah,
I provide it to people who do not regularly practice meditation, that they may benefit from its medical benefits. I've taught it for many, many years as an addiction therapist. In addiction, I found that over a third of the people had secondary diagnoses, and a third of the people at least have anxiety. And human anxiety is the groundwork of most mental illness. And meditation is the cost-free, that is in terms of dollars and cents. It doesn't cost you to meditate, but it is costly. It's costly in time. It's
yeah,
costly in effort. It's costly as a spiritual and a personal discipline. So many people who hear it can't practice it or won't practice it
yeah.
because the cost personally is too high for them. And it is a shame, but it's like so many people who hear the truth but do not follow it.
Right.
And that's the human tragedy. Even in my teaching it routinely in class since 1980s, less than a tenth would practice it regularly, but those who do applaud it. And even those who don't practice it wish they did. They wish they could. And they periodically practice it out of an emergency basis. It gives them whatever benefit they put into it. But for those who practice it regularly over years are the people who fulfill all the promises of meditation. And the other resource I have is the 12 steps of AA and
Yes,
NA, because the steps describe meditation in step 11. Through prayer and meditation, we seek to increase our conscious contact with God, asking only for the knowledge of His will and the power to carry it out. Of all the things that are good for alcoholics and addicts and good for the common citizen, that step holds the largest benefit. Presuming a person can work the other steps, this is the step that allows for solid, long-term growth in consciousness. I also teach this as a part of consciousness because it is succinct and it is true. It's highly focused. We only need to seek the will of God, but we also need to seek power, because if we've worked the steps, we've already obtained surrender. So having power ought not to be a problem if we've already experienced surrender. But if we've experienced surrender, but we have no knowledge of God's will and we have no power, we are surrendered, but empty
but ineffective.
and effective. Yes. So I suppose that is part of my life story that I'd want to go over tonight. And maybe you have any questions. I don't want to go on forever.
No, I mean, I do, but it's a personal question, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
And when you were talking about being a little boy in your experiences, I had one that came up, and I thought maybe you were talking about, calibrating, and I know you use the Hawkins technique with the map of consciousness, and you're very skilled at doing that. So this is what happened to me. My parents had me we were in the car going somewhere, and I was laying on the floor. You know how back then you could lay on the floorboard in the back seat of the car, and I was an only child. My dad was driving, my mom is up front, and I was pretending to be asleep. And so they were teasing me and they were saying, "Well, we're going to stop for ice cream." And they pretended to they did pull the car off the road, and they said they went and got their ice cream, and they're talking about licking their ice cream. And they were teasing me, to try to wake up and be part of and so I pop up from behind the seat, and I said, "I know you were teasing me." And I asked a really funny question, but I remember it to this day, and I couldn't have been more than 4 years old. And I said, "Who makes the trees?" And I think my mom said something like, "Well, the trees come from seeds." I said, "No. Who makes the seeds?" And they both looked at each other, and my mom said, "Well, the seeds come from God." Now, I was 4, but I look back on that today, and I'm already at that age looking at, uh, what's this all about? Where is it coming from? Who? And so my question would be, What kind of calibration does that come out to be at a 4-year-old? I would just be curious if that's possible to even do. If you, I mean, I don't even know if you can do it.
It shows childhood curiosity.
Yeah,
Curiosity at that point should be around 350.
yeah.
That event was calibrated at 350. The day John Gano asked about where do trees come from, calibrates about 325, 335, 345, 350. It's exactly 350.
Yeah, interesting. Just an interesting thing that I remembered.
Yes. Well, that's actually significantly high for a child. Curiosity causes people to be good learners.
Yeah,
It's a sign of openness.
yeah,
It's a positive energy. Um, so good for you.
well, well, I would like to do part two if you can, we can figure out a time to do that. When would be good for you?
Let me look and consider my schedule here, and I'll send you a text. How about that?
Yeah, that'd be fine. And we'll, yeah, we'll see what happens.
All right.
I want to tell you, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This is valuable, valuable information. And I'd hope to have it here and to put it on my website once it's up and running just fine. It's Beyond Control, beyondcontrol.net. And what we're doing is asking people like yourself, Ewell, to come and tell their spiritual story as a resource uh, as consciousness continues to evolve into the new millennia. And I'm privileged to be a part of it. So thank you very much. And I'm going to tell John, I spoke to you about John, my friend John. I wanted to make sure I understood when the meeting was. And if it's okay with you, I'll pass your number along and he can call you concerning this, your healing mission. He will be an excellent fit.
All
So
right. I
thank you
appreciate it.
again. And I'll look for your text and we'll set up session 2, okay?
Thank you very much.
No, thank you. All right,
Bye bye.
bye now. Let's see here.